if everyone can see that. Yeah, I'm Ethan. I'm from a community project in Fife called Eats Rosyth. Eats was set up 6 or 7 years ago, I think, under or as part of a county-wide initiative called Edible and Tasty Spaces in Rosyth, in Fife, and there were a few different edible and tasty projects, but we're the only one that actually remains. We started with the mission of developing community growing places to improve the town of Rosyth and provide easy access to locally grown food for local people. We at that time were able to take over a council-owned bit of brown land, really, which became Rosyth Community Garden, and it was set up by Rosyth Community Council, and basically was just set up by good people wanting to get their hands dirty, I think, and just improve some spaces and give people opportunities to get involved. After a short time, we were able to take over another bit of land, which was conveniently very close to the community garden. It's just over the road. That became an orchard, now named Rosyth Centenary Orchard. And between the green spaces, it's so this first picture is one of Rosyth Community Garden, as it closer to what it looks like today. And there's another, and the orchard that I was mentioning, Rosyth Centenary Orchard, looks like this on a sunny day. Probably not quite like that today. But yeah, so these two outdoor spaces are busy spaces where we not only grow food, but we teach people how to grow food. We have classes coming in from schools every week, and obviously have lots of opportunities for volunteers to get involved. There's some more of the orchard. That's a willow den in our orchard. At the orchard, we also have a couple of beehives, and last year was a fairly good year for honey from the beehives. Yeah, we've got various volunteers helping us out with the hives, and we get a bit of help, or we have had quite a lot of help from Dunfermline Beekeepers Association just to keep us right, but seem to be able to manage it okay. So we, like I say, we made a huge amount of progress building those spaces up and making them good enough to, get people to grow stuff there, and really improve those spaces from what they were a few years ago. We subsequently opened a community hub in the town, which is here. So the community hub was opened really to share information about what we were doing, share information about gardening, and hopefully get people involved, but also to talk about food and cooking and teach people about that. We started after a while to share surplus food from the hub, and yeah, it became a very busy space over a couple of years. I joined the project about 3 years ago, and in that time a lot has changed, obviously, COVID wise and everything. But a couple of years ago we started looking into getting a new building to be our new Rosyth Community Hub, just basically because we just didn't have the space in this small shop as it is. We didn't have the space to do everything we wanted to do. When COVID came about, we were in the process of trying to purchase an old bank premises in Rosyth to be a new base for us. And during COVID, we were able to purchase a new premises, which we're still waiting to get renovated, which is this building. In terms of our food operations over the last couple of years, obviously massively affected by COVID. We had to close our shop or our community hub because of lack of space and restrictions. We spent a good year or so in a local church hall. We were also in another community centre, and we sharing food from those premises. But we're now back in our small shop and have adapted, and now we're just waiting a few months, hopefully, to take over our new premises, and all the potential that will bring in terms of refocusing again on educational activities and getting more of the community involved in our food operations. So that's us, and yeah, it's a busy time. We're in kind of constant transition at the moment, but hopefully in a few months or so we'll be a bit more settled with a view to kind of really planning our future in our new home.
Two questions. One is, what was your initial funding? Who were the funding bodies? And secondly, what were your main challenges other than lack of space?
So I think the project initially got its first tranche of funding from Climate Challenge Fund, and I think it was like I wasn't part of the project back then, but I think they obviously put an application in for climate activities, and it was a really early stage of the project, and I think suddenly that funding came through, and I think as it was told to me, suddenly the project had like £100,000 to do something with. So I think I kind of feel like that's how it's gone for our project over throughout its history. Is like it's grown very rapidly, but I think that is really testament to the people involved, and the desire to really do decent things. So yeah. But the biggest challenges, as far as I've been concerned, are not like we seem to have had, the people involved in the project seem to have had an amazing ability just to take over spaces and make them incredible, desire to work together. So that feels like, to me, that's always been the easy part. I think a big challenge is I work on the food side of things. I work in the community hub and quite closely with our food education side of stuff. And I think if we could see the same physical benefits as we have in our green spaces on this side of things, and reach people about the things that get eaten around here, and people's connection with food. If we could make progress on that, as we have done on the growing side of things, that would be a big challenge that has been overcome. That's why I think there's such a desire to get into our new premises and start doing the things maybe with longer term impact that we maybe haven't been able to do through COVID. So yeah.
Can you refresh my memory? How big is Rosyth? Because I'm thinking my biggest problem here in my village is always getting volunteers.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have had any number of people with all sorts of amazing skill sets.
Yeah, Rosyth's about 15,000 people, 14 or 15,000, I think. Yeah, we haven't struggled. I think, like I was saying, that the success of the project in its early stages really helped us to put the project on the map and reach people. If we reach out for people with different skill sets, yeah, they come forward. There's maybe not a real lack of community engagement, which is really nice. It's really positive.
Okay, is that working now? Yes.
Yep.
Oh, well, thank you. Cool. So my name is Izzy. I am a sustainability officer working at Edinburgh College Students Association, and we run a wide range of projects within the umbrella term that is our Go Green project. But today I'm going to talk about our community fridges and our food waste reduction activities. So just to set the scene a little bit for those of you who might not know anything about Edinburgh College, so I work for the Students Association, which is within the college but is kind of independent charity, and we work with the college to kind of ensure that they are doing the things that students want them to do. We operate across 4 campus locations in Sighthill, Granton, Milton Road and Midlothian, which is essentially the 4 corners of the city, which makes the logistics of running any kind of project really fun. And our Go Green project, and obviously within that the community fridges, is run by 2 full-time members of staff, which is myself and my colleague Claire, and 4 part-time student assistants that are all 7 hours a week. And our project is funded through the Scottish Government's Climate Challenge Fund, which this is our 2nd round of funding that we've achieved. So this project has been running since 2020 and finishes in March this year. And our community fridges so far, that they were set up in early November last year and have so far saved 1,442 kilograms of food from going to waste. So alongside the main aim of the project being kind of educating our student population about how to reduce food waste, the main part of that was setting up community fridges. But as you all know, we've been in a global pandemic. So setting up those community fridges on our campuses was just a no-go for the majority of this 2-year project. Because the college was closed, students weren't coming onto campus, we weren't allowed to come onto campus. So we had to think quite creatively about how we were going to engage students in the topic of reducing food waste while we couldn't set up the community fridges. So instead, we filmed a zero waste cooking series, which is up on our YouTube channel, which kind of went through some key ingredients that people will often find left over in their fridge, like rice, kind of broccoli stalks, carrot heads, things like that, and in a kind of short, bite-sized, engaging way that students could keep coming back to and rewatching, showing them how to use up those leftover items in their fridge rather than just putting them in the food bin. We also asked students to keep home food waste diaries, and then gave them tips on how they could reduce food waste. And to engage students in doing that, we offered incentives for local zero waste and refillery stores around the city. And we also did a bunch of live cook-alongs and provided ingredients free of charge for those students who wanted to take part but couldn't afford to take part on their own. And then we've been really lucky that from about September last year, things started to open back up again. The colleges reopened, students came back onto campus, and our community fridges that had been ordered and had been sitting around since early 2020 were finally able to be plugged in and stocked. So we managed to get them kind of actually up and running and being stocked every week by November 2021. So it was a bit of a mad scramble to try and get them up and running as quickly as possible so we could use the amount of time we had the funding for to really try and achieve the goals, the waste saving goals that we had set ourselves up for. So myself and my colleague Claire had never set up community fridges before, so it has been like learning as we go. So I thought it'd be quite useful to share some of the things we've learned about setting up our community fridges. So spreadsheets and task lists are your friend, because there are multiple people looking after each fridge, because we are set across 4 sites. We have spreadsheets that everyone can access via Google Drive that shows what's in the fridge, when it needs to be removed, when it entered the fridge, when it goes out of date, things like that. So everyone's on the same page about keeping things hygienic and clean and safe for everyone. And also we have like a running task list of everything that needs to be done when a student staff member or another staff member from the Students' Association is on a campus to look after the fridge and make sure everything's tip top. So lots of good communication and collaboration. We knew that we needed to keep track of the temperature for the fridge to make sure that it was always at a safe temperature. So we spent some money on analog thermometers, and I'm just going to tell you now, it's not worth it. Try and get digital ones, they're way more accurate, so don't waste your money. Try to secure multiple food collections for each community fridge, ideally from different supermarkets. When we first set up our fridges, we were using a combination of Neighbourly and FareShare Go to stock all 4 of our fridges. That was a bit of a logistical nightmare, trying to secure food collections from supermarkets that were at the right time of day and on the right days that would fit when we could be at each campus. But we eventually got there. We settled into a bit of a routine, but we definitely found that having multiple sources of food for each fridge helped to make sure that there was a good amount of food and also a good amount of food and also a good variety for our students as well. We also suggest that you make a decision early on about whether you're going to take donations from the public or from your members, because and just communicate really clearly with whatever you decide, because it is a bit of a food hygiene nightmare if random food suddenly appears and you don't know where it's come from. Since we've opened the fridges, we have kind of transitioned into paying for a FareShare membership, which I can talk about a bit more if anyone has any questions. But it is a membership that we have to pay for. But luckily, because we are funded by the Climate Challenge Fund, we've managed to kind of reprofile our budget to be able to buy that membership, which means that we get significantly more food, and we get a greater say on what we get into our fridges, and it also just cuts out a lot of the admin and the travel time, because we can get it delivered rather than having to go around the city to collect food from supermarkets ourselves. I think our next stage in the project is doing some more education with our students around food labeling, because a lot of them see free food and they want to take it, and they love our community fridges, but they still don't fully grasp the concept that this food is generally on its best buy or sell by date, but it's still a lot of the time perfectly edible to eat, and so sometimes that puts them off a bit. So there's still a bit of an education thing that we need to do with our students, but generally they absolutely love our fridges. We get at least 75 kilograms of food into each fridge every week, and it takes if not a day, 2 days to completely go. So it's definitely working in terms of reducing waste, but I think we now need to work on ensuring our students know once they get it home how to make sure that they're saving it from going to waste. And I would say if you are setting up a community fridge with the idea of running it as a waste reduction project, so diverting food from supermarkets that would otherwise end in landfill, weigh in your donation, and then so you know what's gone in, and then you only need to weigh out any food that you're having to dispose of because it's really moldy or stale, and then you can come up with some really useful statistics about the percentage of food that you're saving from going to waste, rather than being too fiddly about having to get people to get users to weigh the food in and out. It just makes everything a bit more streamlined and you get some really useful data. So yeah, thanks for listening. Any questions, and I've included the website link there, which has all our information and a couple of videos about our community fridge project and our Go Green project in more general at the college.
So I'm going to start showing you a video of an event that took place in late November. It was part of the Cultivate project, which is about connecting communities with creative practitioners to reflect and talk and develop projects related to doing something about climate change. So this is a local saw player, and I just thought it was beautiful because it brought together the whole diversity of people that we work with at the centre. So we had there from religious people, school children, volunteers, there are a few like people, sorry, just get rid of this. Start here. Yeah, it was just such a lovely variety, and I think that really represents what we're about. It's bringing, like, linking together like these different aspects of growing food and getting people more aware about the environment, about climate change, and living better lives, because that's what the Maxwell Centre is about. It's really helping people to feel better and do better in their lives. So we've got three main strands of work. Max Support is more about helping people to access food. So we have a food bank, we do food bank referrals, we've got a community cupboard, and we also help people with just general advice and support to get on better with their life. But that links in really well with all our youth work. So we've got like after school clubs, work with schools on a regular basis. Like we've got about 4 local primary schools and 3 nurseries that come to us. Like holiday clubs and things like that. So there's 2 members of staff that are fully dedicated to youth work. And then we've got our Maxwell Garden and outreach kind of program where we work with volunteers, and we have a variety of activities. But I think that's one of the unique things about our garden, is that we link together the more social side of things with more environmental side of things. We're based in a multiple deprived area in the hill town in Dundee. So it's quite a challenging area in terms of the data, in terms of like mental health and obesity and things like that is just really, really shocking and really challenging. So our project fits in really well with that, and it links in really well together. And we get people in our community garden that I don't think you would possibly see in other places go and take part in a community garden, but here, because they feel it's part of their community and it's where they come to anywhere for other activities, it becomes something that's more natural and easy, and there's quite a strong sense of ownership, I think, of the garden and all the things that are taking place here. So yeah, 7 members of staff, and we've got about 30 volunteers who come in every week on a regular basis. The garden has been there for about 10 years now, and it was originally set up with Climate Change Challenge Fund. And since we get funding from Big Lottery, Investing in Communities, Government Fund, Rank, Roberts and Trust. So a broad variety, because in comparison with other community gardens, we're quite a large team. So there obviously needs to be quite a lot of effort into funding to keep it all running. So yeah, just a few images to kind of give you an idea of what we do. Yes, as I mentioned, school groups, we work with toddlers, family groups. We've got, I think, over 25 different groups of people, children, adults, young people, cooking groups. We do a lot of workshops as well, depending on what people are looking for and interested in. And something that we find that COVID really triggered was obviously a much more interest in gardening. So we took advantage of that, and we set up a community growing library, so people can actually take tools and books and seeds and what they might need to get growing, but also we give them like one-to-one personalized advice and help them with planning what they're going to be growing at home. We also set up like a new blog and a Facebook group and an interactive map of Dundee, so that people could get an idea of which allotments or community gardens were closer to them, so they could go to those places, because lots of people don't have a garden. So this was all about making it more accessible. And the Facebook group has just been amazing. Like, we started a COVID, now it's about 1,000 people from the city, and everyone's like exchanging cuttings and ideas and showing off, and it's just like really good energy, and it keeps everyone going and growing, and it's really nice. Another thing that we do is we make harvest boxes with the produce from the garden, but yeah, it's also used for cooking groups and the community cupboard. So it's like, it's really like all kind of comes together in that way. And because we didn't have enough to do, we've also trying to do some more work in our local green space, which is on our doorstep. It's a Hilltown Park, and it's quite a rundown kind of park. And although people really love it, but there's so much opportunity there. So we're working on some community design projects with local designers and creative organisations to get people to say what they would like to do in the park and increase growing space and edible tree trails and things like that. And also the same time, like upskilling people and getting people involved. So yeah, I think that is me. Yeah, thank you very much.
The Leith Community Growers started, we came out of the COVID lockdown and we started out as a COVID response project, and I was working as a fundraiser for Southwest Edible Estates. We're part of the Edible Estates kind of family of projects, and I found myself, let's see if I can do this where it starts, slideshow. There we go. So yeah, I found myself the person in Leith delivering a homegrown project. So we were delivering seeds and compost and pots and all that kind of stuff. People were just signing up in the early lockdown era time. And I found myself, yeah, just whizzing about Leith, dropping off stuff so that people could grow food from home. Then we set up like a Facebook group, doing online videos and tutorials. And we wanted people just to like grow something, start growing food at home in the most kind of, you know, peas and spinach and, you know, radishes and the most kind of basic and easy things to grow. So from there, I live in Leith, it's my kind of community, so it was really great to be able to be a part of it. And lots, as we know, lots of organisations and groups just started doing stuff, from people forming little groups to tidy up and make planters on in their estates, to like mutual aid groups and food projects and growing projects and all that kind of stuff. So we became a part of that. We adopt bits of land and spaces in and around Leith Walk to put in herb gardens and make planters and all that kind of stuff. For people that don't know Leith, it's one of the most densely populated areas in the UK. So I think somebody said their town was like 15,000 people. There's probably, I don't know. I don't know what the population of Leith is, but there's a lot of us, and we're like on top of each other. And you know, we're also part of one of the biggest kind of infrastructure projects in the country with the tram works going up and down Leith Walk. So we're incredibly like busy, very diverse, but space is completely at a premium. I listened to a podcast and it was Incredible Edible, and this fabulous woman was talking about their project, and she described the idea of having, it came about after the financial crash in 2008. If anybody is from like Incredible Edible on this call, please correct me. But what I took from it was that they started their project to create a visible expression of kindness and community in their area, which they expressed through growing food and public herbs so that people could pick herbs and go home and add it to their dinner. And I thought, what a great thing. We don't have any space in Leith. We're a community growing project without really, we don't have a garden. So what you're looking at here is a Meanwhile site, which is part of a project that has been given to the community. And it's at some point going to be turned into a tram works. So not exactly a long-term kind of growing solution, but that is our wheat field. We grew a very small wheat field as part of, we know that we're not going to grow enough food to feed people. So we want to create growing opportunities that engage members of the public, that give people an opportunity to think about food in a different way. So that's what we did. Why can't I do my slide 2? Let's try slide 1. Oh God, there we go. Okay, so this is our Meanwhile site. Over here is Leith Walk, and that is our wheat field and part of our garden. And it's all out of raised beds. If you look at it on Google Maps, it's like a former car park. But we got a part of this space, and we gather together and attempt to grow things and have weekly sessions where people can come along and be involved. We're very small. We were talking about funding earlier on, and we've had stages of getting kind of COVID-related funding, which is stages sustained 20, 25 hours a week. We're now down to about 7. So, you know, it's very difficult financially as a project, but, you know, you live in hope. This is where we started, you know, delivering basic things to people. this is our herb garden on Leith Walk, and we had days of making planters. We had a partnership with the tool library last year called 100 Planters, and we made and distributed 100 planters to give away to people with seeds, and made compost available so that people could come and collect and grow things on their front doorstep. As I said, we are a project of very small spaces, so we were trying to make growing spaces that you could fit outside your front door or on your windowsill or against a railing, or this is behind a fence above a bridge on Leith Walk. But we wanted to encourage people to kind of reimagine what abandoned spaces could be, and we'll continue to try to do that in our area as best we can. This is part of our it's against our shipping container, and we try and be available when it's bright, so we're not open at the moment, but on a Monday evening, 6 to 8, the gates are open. We have a list of jobs to do. We have some volunteers come. You can see some of the little planters there. We try and have a mix of little basic things to make and things to do. Well, I'd love to be more organized. I find myself like leading a community growing project, not knowing that much about growing stuff. So I'm always desperately trying to learn. So there's a lot of that, and we're all kind of in it together. We're very lucky in Leith. The good thing about living in Leith and in Edinburgh is that there's lots of people. The bad thing about having a garden project in Leith and Edinburgh is that there's lots of people and there isn't any space. So, what we can't grow, we're very lucky to have projects to partner with, like the tool library. The wheat was a partnership project with Scotland the Bread. I'm sure some of you will know Scotland the Breads. They do like heritage grains and stuff. So we grew a tiny bit because it gave us an opportunity to talk about food systems. This year, we're going to use that 3 meters by 3 meters, which I very grandly call a field. We're going to use our field, and we're going to grow flax, and we're going to make linen, and we're going to make a tea towel about this big. And it's going to give us an opportunity to talk about clothing systems and fabric. One of our committee members just done a master's on sustainable fashion. So we get to, so here is our group and others who went to a flax processing farm in East Lothian. So we get to partner with people who have more space and more experience than us. We did a tree, we've just been kind of asked to manage, or we've made an arrangement to manage an orchard in Leith Links. So it's not ours, it's part of the council's, but we did a tree pruning workshop there. So we're just going to kind of try and work and adapt in our local community as best we can with what we have, and we're very lucky. There's lots going on, and when it works really well, we're well placed to partner with and make friends with lots of really interesting organizations around and about us. So and we hope to get some more funding and to be able to develop more areas and more projects in Leith. And if anyone is in Leith or in North Edinburgh and would like to get in touch, we're always open to collaborations and visits and cups of tea and discussions, looking at bits of grass and bits of land and thinking, God, could we grow something here? So and there's our wheat field again, which I'm immensely proud of, and you're all invited for tea and toast at the Meanwhile site on Leith Walk. So that's it from me, really. Yeah, looking forward to what everybody else has got to say.
So yeah, this is a slide from the farm, which is in North Edinburgh, and as you can see, there's an amazing panorama. We're much earlier on than a lot of the other projects that I've talked so far. Even though we've been working on this project for about 2 years, we've only just started actually being able to do infrastructure on the land. But as you can see, it's this amazing piece of arable land that sits, well, I'll show you a map, but beautiful view over to the Firth of Forth. Now, let's see if I can change the slide. So the reason this project started was that I used to cycle past this bit of land all the time to and from. I've worked in North Edinburgh, in Granton and Muirhouse and Pilton for many years, and this piece of land just had sheep grazing on it. And I spoke to another friend of mine that we were working in a community garden, and we just thought this was an amazing asset for the city. in terms of food growing potential. It's very rare to find a piece of land this size within a city limits, really. So we wrote to the council with a proposal, and it's kind of followed on and progressed from there. But the idea is really that it's a land-based project that connects people back to the land with integrated landscape management. So the main aims being organic food growing, habitat enhancement, increasing biodiversity, looking at soil health, looking at ways of growing within agroforestry systems, which I think will be one of the first times that's happened in an urban setting, and also just trying to create a system of food sovereignty within North Edinburgh specifically, but within the wider kind of city. We will be doing a huge seed saving programme, and yeah, all the pictures are of landscapes of the farm, because there's absolutely no infrastructure on the farm apart from some deer fencing that we put up recently. So there's no other words on there. I don't know why that hasn't come up. Here we go. So just a little bit of background about our organisation. We set up Edinburgh Agroecology Cooperative in order to kind of take on this project. So we set up in 2019 as a community interest company, but we're set up as a workers cooperative. There is 6, we're a fairly small team at the moment. We're hoping to expand that this year, but there's been 4 of us for 2 years. 2 other people have just joined, and we've just recruited 2 external directors. We have an advisory board group, which is, there's between 15 and 20 people come to these advisory group meetings, and the majority is made up of local people from the communities around or local community groups. And then there's other representatives from organisations such as Land Workers Alliance, Nourish, Green Space Lothian, Scottish Wildlife Trust, kind of relevant organisations that can advise us on specific aspects of the project. And we meet with them roughly once a month. So we've secured an initial 25-year lease for the land from the council, with an aim for that afterwards to actually be for at least 100 years, if not in perpetuity. Like I said, we're a community interest company at the moment. We are looking to become a community benefit society in the future. And at the very beginning of the project, we did a community consultation, which we would have much preferred to have in person, but because of COVID, it had to all be online. However, we did get 1,025 people responding, so that was pretty good response for an online community consultation. And I would say 95% of the people in that consultation were very positive in favour of the project. There was a few people who had were concerned about development or the view, or us spoiling their view, or various kind of strange, well, I mean genuine concerns for them. But actually, in the whole, there's been very positive support for the project. So this is an aerial view of the land. This is the sea to the north. As you can see, golf courses on either side. One's private, one's Edinburgh Council. And then a large proportion of kind of residential housing to the southeast there. And it's 100 acres altogether. It is part of this historic landscape around the castle. Just to the south of the farm is the castle, which is actually why this land's never been developed, because there's a very old law that says the view from the castle has to be unobstructed. So that's actually saved this piece of land from housing development. And the interesting thing about where this is sited is it sits between very different communities. To the west is a very affluent community, Cramond and Barnton, which is one of the most affluent areas in the whole of Edinburgh. And then to the southeast east you have Muirhouse, Pilton, Drylaw, which are areas, you know, of high levels of multiple deprivation, as it's called. So these are really the areas that we're wanting to engage with and that we're working hardest to engage with. I mean, our whole aim is to make sure there's equitable access to local fresh food. So, you know, whilst we are also engaging with the communities on the other side, to the west of the farm, it's really these areas to the southeast that we are working hardest through their community groups and through the existing networks we have. This is just giving a little bit of background about the farms, the land is to be farmed. In the North Field is wetland. You can kind of see a shadow there in the North Field. There's a lot of migratory wading birds residents there. And the whole farm has become just this haven for dog, especially professional dog walkers, which are kind of overrunning the farm at the moment during COVID. But now we put up quite a lot of deer fencing. The public are starting to see that things are changing on the land and are getting used to it. There was a bit of opposition to the fact that they felt that this space was being taken away from them, but actually when the sheep were on there, nobody used to walk on it either. So it's only during lockdown that people started to use it, but there's huge amounts of green space around, and we've been very mindful in our design that there's still a lot of public access. Just briefly, to the east side is kind of the community growing. This is obviously a digital graphic, so the allotments are not going to look that neat. I mean, they look very neat there, and these community growing plots. But to the east side is the growing area, 50 plots. There's a community orchard. There will be woodland to the north of that. And then to the west side is agroforestry alleys that you can see there, market garden, coppice woodland, and there's field crops to the north of the agroforestry alleys. This shows, is a simple diagram about the kind of zoning. Everything is integrated though. Nothing is a kind of standalone decision. We've made the decisions based on the interaction between these spaces and the transition between these spaces. But roughly a third is food growing, a third is for community growing, and a third for community access, and a third is for biodiversity and wildlife. This is an image of the wetland, and you can see the towers from Muirhouse in the background. So we've got funding to expand the wetland. We're planting roughly, overall, we're planting about 5 hectares of woodland, but over the next few years, we've got 12,000 trees to plant in the next 6 weeks. So if anybody fancies coming and doing some tree planting, you can get in touch. And we're planting a double row native hedgerow all the way up around the periphery farm. We've already done some tree planting with some members of the local community back in December, which was nice. That was almost a symbolic kind of us being on the land. We did that on the winter solstice. And we'd just been given permission to kind of start our work on the land. So we planted 270 trees, but it was more of a symbolic and ceremonial kind of tree planting. These are the different ways that there are various ways of community engagement, community pathways to engage on the farm. Again, just shows the different zones. The production, there's a large market garden space, pretty extensive field crops, 10 agroforestry alleys, coppice woodland. There's still lots of land that has not been designed, and we on purpose did not design it because, depending on what happens in the future, people might make different decisions about what's grown. We're also working with Scotland the Bread, so that we will be doing grain trials, pulse trials. Not that much more to say other than we're working with existing community networks, community groups about distribution, doing a CSA to do with food distribution. And we wrote a little bit about the challenges at the end there, but if anybody has any questions, they're welcome to get in touch with us about it.
Hello, yes. I haven't got a presentation. I apologize for that. We have been up at Gracemount Walled Garden since 2014. We had Climate Challenge Fund money at that point for about 2 or 3 years, and that made life a lot easier, except when we discovered, as always, that there's a slight problem. The area that we had marked out for grass, we suddenly discovered, for the vegetables, sorry, we suddenly discovered under the grass was 8 inches of shale. It had been a tennis court, so we had to quickly think how we got money in to actually change that into raised beds and got the compost for it. It's fine now, but it takes time. We are regenerative. We started using Charles Dowding's methods first, moved on, and obviously built up our compost heaps, etc., so that we could cover our bare earth and look after it. No pesticides and no, it's very much organic. We're particularly lucky in the garden because right next door to us, within a 2-minute walk, is the primary school. And that means that the primary school can just come in, and actually, since COVID, every class in the primary is in the garden once a week. And the teachers are getting very much more used to actually teaching other things like maths and stuff using the garden, because we've got woodland around it as well. We are in the process, it takes a long time, of trying to get an asset transfer of the garden and our ruined stables to turn it into a food hub and cafe. That has taken some time, and we've been told, or got the impression, certainly from the council, that we should actually look to cover the whole ground. So it's the woodland plus the old mansion that they closed down on us about 2 years ago, which means we haven't had toilets or facilities. We just have got a porta cabin, so we're in the process of getting that sorted out. But it's slow, and obviously one of the things that we are looking at in the garden is diversity. One of the recent books from America, Regenerative, described a whole list of vegetables that they're all throwing in together, because apparently farmers in America find it difficult to get good food. So we are looking into how we get the equivalent of that in Scotland. We've got somebody in Aberdeen who's giving us some advice, and the head of horticulture for Garden Organic has asked them to look at the seeds for that as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. So we've got wildflower meadows in there. We've got, I'm finding it really interesting actually, because we've had 2 or 3 events. Last week we had a Burns event, or 2 weeks ago. There was a Burns event and we had 120 people there. So in an area that's a deprived area and people didn't have so much appreciation of why you would want to grow food, we are suddenly getting an awful lot more interest and getting more volunteers. And we are hoping to we're also working with high school, Gracemount High School. Our gardener works there, 80 minutes teaching, and we've been asked by the high school if we can actually give more classes, and would be 3 classes getting in the high school, which is a fantastic thing. And because it's the person that is helping is a home ec teacher, so we can take the cooking right into it as well. So we're really now doing an awful lot better, but it's not been easy. The Gracemount is actually one of the food deserts in Edinburgh. There is no real food for people to buy. So that's one of the things that we're hoping that we can set up as a food hub, is somewhere that people will have access to good and good food. But one of the other things that we want is to see education really taking on nature as part of our core subject, so that this is part of the much more open for all people to understand about the nature, fungi, all the things that we have not been knowing about in our past. And so that's very much what we're trying to do. But as I say, we've got problems with the, well, hopefully we'll get set up with the porta cabin and eventually get access to the room stables and get that turned into something that's worth having.
So hi, I'm Abby. I'm going to try and stick to my allotted 5 minutes. I'm aware that we don't have a huge amount of time. Just briefly though, about Propagate. We're a worker cooperative. There's about 13 of us. Some of our propagators are based in Glasgow, most of them in fact. There's about 4 or 5 of us in Dumfries and Galloway, a couple in South Ayrshire, and we have projects across all those areas, also in Kilmarnock, something else we're working on in Falkirk, and another project in Wishaw. Most of what we do is the kind of projects that you've all been describing. So supporting groups and organisations to set up community growing spaces, food justice projects like community fridges and community food shops, teaching people healthy cooking skills, lots of different collaborative pieces of work. And we work in partnership with other organisations. So we don't actually have our own garden, but we do a lot of helping other groups to kind of get theirs established. A lot of what I do that in Dumfries and Galloway, but another big part of what I do is supporting farmers and looking at sustainable agricultural systems. So that's what I'm going to talk about just now. So what is the South West Regenerative Farmers Network? Well, these are our aims, so facilitating opportunities to learn and exchange knowledge between farmers, looking at nature-based and regenerative forms of agriculture and supporting farmers to adopt those and to get that voice represented at policy level. So those are the 3 kind of core aims. And it's come about, just very briefly, we're sort of kicking this off new for this year, but we have had a previous project running over the last year called the Fork to Farm Dialogues. The Fork to Farm Dialogues were a partnership with Nourish, and that was a massive global collaborative piece of work where facilitators in loads of different countries, Indonesia, Mexico, Kenya, all over the place. So we as facilitators brought together farmers and local authority policy officers to talk about how we can address the climate and nature emergency through agricultural and food production change. So because I'm based in South West Scotland, because most of the farmers in South West Scotland are beef and lamb and dairy, that's the area that we focused on, although we do have some market gardeners, including myself. So yeah, that's the kind of brief aims and a little bit about the background to the project. So how are we doing this? So the picture there that I've used, so all these animals are kind of belong to our members. So they're these lovely saddlebacks. They're Suey Fields. They're a kind of a small scale regenerative farm. And underneath that I can't remember the variety of sheep, but they're at Low Old Girth Farm, which is an organic and regenerative farm just outside Dumfries. So first up, we've got an email group with for all farmers, but also including the local authority policy officers from last year. And that's a space really where anybody can kind of share information and knowledge, including things like webinars. So if I come across something really useful that I think farmers would be interested in, such as some of the Land Workers Alliance webinars that are happening at the moment, and the recently announced big collaboration between Nourish and a few other organisations on agroecology. So there's some interesting stuff there. We're organising farm walks. So I've asked my farmers, what are you interested in? And it's things like reducing inputs, increasing biodiversity, looking at soil and better soil structures, looking at agroforestry systems, mob grazing, that kind of thing. So we're organising events and webinars, more than that, farm walks around those topics. And the whole project is linked in with the Dumfries and Galloway Sustainable Food Partnership, which I also coordinate. And I can talk more about that later or in another presentation. But that's basically a policy level working group looking at how to address food systems change through holistic collaboration. So why are we doing this? Well, obviously we have a climate and nature emergency that urgently needs addressing, and that requires a lifestyle shift in all areas. Food obviously matters to everybody. We all eat every day. Fully support anyone's choice to be vegan or vegetarian, but I think we can also advocate for less but better meat, and meat that is farmed in a way that is good for the environment. And farming certainly can be part of the solution in terms of better soils.
Right, so I'll try and keep it to 5 minutes. What you can see is an overview of the Grown project, Shettleston Community Grown project. The project was set up 10 years ago by local people who had an interest in growing their own fresh fruit and vegetable. After all the initial red tape, it was funded by the Climate Challenge Fund, who, listening to a lot of other people on here, have been the organisation that the Scottish Government that financed a lot of organisations. So everyone will know all the red tape and all the weighing and all the stuff that has to go along with being part of the Climate Challenge Fund, which is quite challenging at times. So the project has evolved into a lot more than just food growing. We do volunteering sessions, outreach work with local schools and nurseries. During COVID, providing food aid as well. We're in a children's grown club called the Smell of Well Club for 7 to 12-year-olds. Supporting guidance to other organisations locally and worldwide as well. But also, more importantly, providing a safe place and a safe environment for people struggling with mental health issues, with social isolation and all the associated illnesses that have hit the headlines because of COVID. But one of the most important things we do is to teach local people, schools, nurseries and the Smell of Well Club how to cook the fresh fruit and vegetables that they've grown on site as well. So we do a lot of outreach work in schools, nurseries and other organisations that need assistance. And our volunteers also help with the ongoing maintenance at the project as well. Because the project is 10 years old, the wood around the raised beds needs replaced at an alarming rate. Long story, but the architect had used the wrong type of wood, and the project all started to fall apart after 5 years. So we had to reskin all the raised beds. Project initially cost £120,000 to set up, and the cost if we wanted to redo the raised beds today was nearly £250,000. So hence the reason why we have to do ongoing maintenance. So we have a dedicated group of volunteers who help out on site and at projects we have going on in Glasgow as well. Smell of Well Club is a club we run for 7 to 12-year-olds for local kids in the area as well. Run by 2 youth workers, 1-to-8 ratio, so we can work with 16 kids. And we have more than that on the waiting list. So we do a lot of stuff on site with the kids. We teach them how to grow their own fresh fruit and veg. We do residentials with them. We teach them about nature and the environment. And COVID hit it really bad as well. But I can speak about that later on. But it's a well-established club, and we have quite a long waiting list. We also do corporate volunteering on site as well. Lots of organisations come to the project. They want to give something back to the community as well. So we do lots of corporate groups. Again, this was hit on the head by the COVID pandemic as well, but we've had requests in the last couple of weeks for groups to come on site as well and to give something back to the community, which we're always grateful for. We also run a family fun day every year as well. That's free for the community, where we open up the community garden. We have tombolas, clowns, home baking, people around the project as well. We get some volunteers from that as well, and it's just for the local community to take an interest in what we do and to show them what we do. Smellawella Club, again, a club for 7 to 12-year-olds. We teach them all aspects of food growing, from planting the seeds, nurturing the seeds, and then harvesting what we grow as well. We think it's really important that they get to harvest the crops and to peel the potatoes, carrots, and onions, instead of us doing all the work and just giving it to them. So they produced a recipe book with over 25 recipes in it, which they designed themselves, and they sell the recipe books at family fun day and events for £3, and then all the profits all go back into the Smellawella Club. Again, a really popular club, and hopefully this year it will start to improve even more. So food growing is our main aim. The project exists to teach local people how to grow, nurture, harvest, and then cook the produce that they grow in the raised beds. We've got over 50 raised beds in the project, and they're all taken. And we're just in the process of getting another 9 raised beds. So hopefully the waiting list will come down a bit as well. Over the last year, we've had lots of the Chinese community have moved into the east end of Glasgow and have taken an interest in food growing as well. So we welcome quite a few of them into the project as well, and the stuff that they grow is quite amazing, and how quickly they grow it. Last year as well, the soft fruits produced an amazing amount of crops. The plum trees, apples, pears, blueberries were all really heavy croppers. As I said before, COVID-19 had a major impact in 2020 on the project, with basically nothing been done. The committee had taken the decision to basically close the project down. But as we all know, if you close down a project and you don't do any maintenance or any weeding, then nature will always take over everything. So a year of weeds takes nearly 2 years to get rid of. So we've been in the process of doing that. Okay, so for 2021, 2022, we the volunteers did 2,987 volunteers hours, was quite amazing when you consider it was during a COVID pandemic. And at the living wage, that was worked out at nearly £29,000 worth to the project if we were to do that in wages. So a huge thanks to all the volunteers. And going forward, we've got a lot of new stuff in the pipeline. That'll always be about food growing and supporting the local community. And that's basically the project in a nutshell.
So we could move to a Q&A session now. Like, there was a couple of questions in the chat from Jenny that maybe she would like to address now because they were already there. And then I could ask you if you could either raise your hand using the Zoom feature to raise your hand, or pop your question in the chat and say for who it is if you want to put it in the chat. But Jenny, would you like to come forward and ask your questions?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, just to anybody really about growing compost, and I kind of assume that everybody will be wanting to use peat-free compost. I started growing using a wool and bracken compost last year, which was quite good, but it would dry out quite quickly. Just wondering what other people are using and finding that works very well.
Can I answer that from my experience, Jenny?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, when I was a market grower, I was using Melcourt compost. It's that's the company's Melcourt, and they had two products. One was Silver Grow, I believe, and it was a wood chip based and coir based compost. But I found that was extremely good quality compost, and it was organic, an organic compost. So yeah, and I'm not sure if it's still available, but it was available from Clydeside Trading Society, which were a commercial horticultural co-op, horticultural supplier.
Would you mind just popping those words in the chat, Lix, because I'm not quite sure how to spell them.
Yeah.
That would be really good. And are they for seeds and for potting on and so on?
I believe so. I'll send you the detail anyway.
Great, thank you.
I'll put the detail in there.
Thank you. And well, while we are at the questions, I could also ask you please to fill in our event survey. So while we are still here or after the event, wherever is more convenient for you, it's just a couple of minutes. So I'll pop that into the chat. But let's continue with the questions. So anybody has another question, raise your hand or pop it in the chat, please. And say for who it is or if it's for everyone.
Yeah, I had a question for Kenny McCubbin, actually. It was really about, because I'm just really in the very first stage of setting up a community food group. I'm just wondering roughly how many members are on the actual committee. I mean, I'm trying to get an idea of how big your operation is. I mean, you were mentioning about 120 raised beds. Is that right? But
no, 50 raised beds.
Yeah, I was just wondering how. Sorry.
We have 50 raised beds and the possibility of another 9. So
50.
At the moment, there's 9 people on the committee. So we can take up to a maximum of 10, but at the moment we've got 9.
And roughly how many volunteers kind of help out with the labour of things?
Volunteers, by the very nature, mean that one day you can have 1 and a week later you can have 23. So during the winter we usually have about 10 to 15 volunteers, and over the summer that can increase to 25 to 30 on one day. It all depends on what other people have got ongoing and all the stuff that they do, but the very nature of volunteers means that you can never rely on them, but it's always good to have them. But as a project, we wouldn't exist without volunteers.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really great that you're using all the getting all these other organisations involved with it, and particularly the school, because the project I've got in mind will be alongside our local primary school. It was a question about you using the Smelly Welly Club. I thought it was a brilliant name. Do you have any copyright on that?
I think my previous boss should put a copyright on it, or so she said. But it's an unusual name, but it's
well, yeah, I think it's brilliant anyway. Yeah.
You can copyright it and you can send you can use it and you can send the money to me.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The question for Manuela, the growing library that your garden set, is it books with tips about growing food, or is it seeds? Like what kind of library is it, or is it more like a tools library? From Patty.
Hey, Patty. Yeah, so we have a bit of everything. We've got the basic tools, just hand tools, but also machines that might be more expensive to purchase. So yeah, from lawn mowers and rotavators and things like that, but also like woodwork tools, so saws and jigsaws and drills and things like that. And then we've got a variety of books. And what we've done is like we've worked on, like we've tried to find books to respond to lots of the questions that people have had, like growing in small spaces, organic growing, and so on and so forth. So trying to cover that, growing trees, but all focused on growing. So it's really nice. We've got a really nice selection, so they can, you know, see what they're interested in and go for that. And then we've got seed library as well. So basically we get lots of donations of seeds. So just sorting those out, and also doing a little bit of advice around seed saving, getting people engaged with that. So we've got a little group of people that actually save seeds and then donate them back to the library. It'd be good to do a bit more of that, but it's quite a lot of admin time to kind of keep on top of everything. So we use My Turn is the platform we use, which is really good and really helpful to keep everything on track.
Cool, thank you. So any more questions? And I'll remind you again to please fill the survey before you leave. If you have to leave, we really, really appreciate the feedback so we can improve these networking events. So question from Jackie, how groups are doing with cooking classes during COVID? Are you keeping groups small? So for those of you who are engaging with groups in cooking classes.
We did our cooking classes outside in the garden, not during the first lockdown, but then from the second lockdown, we just reorganized everything so we could do it all outdoors. So we were doing even like pizza on the barbecue and all sorts of soups and all sorts of things outdoors. So it was actually really good. And we're trying to keep some of that so it's not all inside, indoors and in the kitchen. It actually has added another, you know, really interesting element to what we're doing.
Anna has a question. What was the tool you used there? My Turn? My Turn? Yeah, great. Okay. Yep. Any more questions for a specific project or for everyone? We will share in the end this recording. So if there was bits and bobs they want to look at again or want to check the websites or the contacts, we will share the recording with you in the end, together with the websites from everyone. But if there are any pressing questions that you have right now, please bring them forward. Oh, thanks, Patty. And if you want to share your direct contacts in the chat, for those of you who didn't yet, if you are happy that we share your email addresses and your contacts with the group for further networking, please put them in the chat. We will share the websites and the recording of your presentations. So question to Lauriston Farm, would Lauriston Farm be considering using the food grow at the project to be giving to community food pantries? No, we lost Tony, that's right. Okay, so maybe you could get in touch with Tony after that. We can put you in touch and ask her directly. So yeah, Tony left and so did Abby. So any questions for them, we could pass them along. And so did Ethan at the start from Eats Rosyth.
Can I ask Pat some questions? Hi, Pat. How sort of roughly, how big is your community garden and how many members are there? And is it allotment? I wasn't quite clear whether it was a sort of allotments or was it a kind of just a community growing area that everyone's involved with?
It's very much a community growing area because we want to let schools come in. And it's very hard if you've got sites that are specifically for people. So we've kept it that way currently. It's probably a third of an acre.
Okay.
Something like that.
And how many people are sort of generally, roughly, how many people are involved with that?
Well, we've got 2 members of staff, but obviously during COVID, they've not been working as much. We managed to keep somebody working at least 1 day a week. But that's been the problem, and obviously that shows in the garden as well. But we've got 4 trustees because we're now a charity, and we've got probably about a dozen volunteers now. It's growing. So as I said, it's not easy to get people, but we are getting a lot more families coming in, which is good. And during COVID, we managed to get some COVID money and work with people that had mental health problems. We actually got the primary school recommended 16 families that they felt needed to get out. And we worked with them for 2 or 3 months. So we certainly do work. We want to do more and more work with that, but we also have worked with teenagers as well that haven't necessarily found anything they're particularly interested in, but they seem to like working with us. So yes, and by the way, we make all our own compost. We've got leaf mold compost, and we've got compost because otherwise, with the bare earth, we couldn't cover it. We need the compost to cover it, make sure that we are not leaving bare earth.
Sure. Do you use that for propagating seeds as well? Your own compost, or would you?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, and the other thing is we have got some landscape people who actually drop off some of their stuff that we can compost as well. So, you know, they're usually very happy to leave some.
Right.
So you can start to build, but I mean, to me, that's one of our problems actually with the schools, is because it's not easy to find a way to get enough for composting, and yet it's such a critical part of learning about looking after the earth, the soil. And so we're sort of looking at how we're going to do that in the future.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an issue in other councils, but I believe, you know, the council here in Argyll have quite a lot of waste, and actually waste that it comes off the sea, which contained a lot of seaweed. They had to go and put it into landfill because of the regulations on it. And I just see it as, you know, prime compost. Yes, there is probably plastic waste in there and things that are maybe not that great, but it just seems sort of balmy that you know, there's some sort of regulation with you know, organic waste has to go to landfill and not be used on community allotments.
We had to start when we had 8 inches of gravel. We had to start with compost from the council, or from the group that work with the council, but they are very good, and they actually gave you quite a lot for nothing, more or less. But we now have loads of worms and lots, so we built the soil up since then. So it's very much, obviously, the soil is so critical. If we don't do it, what people don't realise is we've lost 80% of our nutritional content in our soil in the last 70 years. So our vegetables are fine, but they're not nearly as healthy as they were.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for that, Pat.
It's all right.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Well, it's time for us to wrap this networking event. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for filling our survey to let us know how we can improve these networking events, because we are now, like we said, testing this new format on topics, and we will share in the end. Become a SCCAN member. Yeah, if you're not a SCCAN member yet, check our website, it's free. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with us either through our social media or through email.